We can write any kind of data into environment keys like this one here. But these keys don't actually watch for changes in observable objects. This means if you create a class instance and put it into the environment key, SwiftUI won't reinvoke any views depending on that data when it changes. In practice, this means using the @environment property wrapper is more suited to value types like integers and strings and arrays as compared to EnvironmentObject, which is better for reference types. The clue is in the name somewhat, EnvironmentObject for objects. Now, there are two compelling reasons why, where possible, you should aim to use simple environment keys rather than environment objects. The first is simple. The environment key protocol requires that we provide a default value for any custom keys to use when they are missing. In comparison, EnvironmentObject can be missing entirely, and we try and use it at runtime will just cause your app to crash. In theory, this is the kind of thing that should be caught in development, but should in coding often means might, so why take the risk? The second reason is more complex. When an observable object announces changes that happen to itself, SwiftUI will make any views that depend on it get refreshed. And that sounds straightforward, but has important impact at times when we're changing lots of data, of which only some views might care about. Now, to demonstrate this, we need to add another custom environment key alongside the stroke width key we have already, and this will store the font to display for title text. So I'll say there's a struct called title font key, an environment key, with a default value, and I'll make this equal to font.custom, I'll do Georgia size 34, just stand out nicely. Then we'll add the environment objects for this. Environment values, sorry. Title font is a font. We'll do get self title font key dot self, and then we'll do a set, same thing, equals new value, like that. Again, I'd recommend adding a little view extension here so it's easier to access. Something like this will do the trick. Extension view func title font is a font, return some view, then just do environment of title font for that font. And now in content view, we can go ahead and send both those values in. Here's our slider value we have already. Below that, at state private var, title font is font.large title. That's the default one for this view. In our vstack, I'm going to add some text saying hello world. In whatever font is used for our title font, we can see it working nicely. And then below the slider, I'm going to add two buttons. One to switch to the view's default font, and one to get a custom font from an external theme. So we'll say first button is default font, and we'll do title font is .large title, and then custom font, might use an external one from the font key we made earlier, like that. And finally, we want to inject that value into the environment down here with our stroke width modifier. We'll do title font, like that. And that should work great. I can now drag this slider up and down to get thicker or thinner circles, but also change between default and custom font to see the large title and Georgia font used. Now I'm going to add one more line of code here so you can see what's really happening behind the scenes. In our circles view, in our body thing there, I'm going to ask it to print out in circles view.body and then return back the for each so it works correctly. And that means we're now going to print out a message every time this body property is being reinvoked. So I'll press Command R to run the code. And as you see, I drag the slider around, it's printing out again and again, it's in the body, it's reinvoking it again, again, again. See it all the time, right? Now, that's cool, but notice how if I change default font and custom font, nothing's printed out, right? SwiftUI understands that they aren't being used by Circle View. It doesn't care about the variant value for title font, and so it doesn't reinvoke the body. Doesn't do it. Doesn't need to do it, so it's fine. That's how environment keys work, but what happens if we had an environment object here instead? And to find that out, we're going to make a new class to store our two values together as one piece of theme data. So we can say there's a class called theme manager, which is an observable object. It's published for a stroke width of 1.0 and for a title font of title font key default value, like that. Now in Circles view, we aren't going to watch for an individual key. We'll instead expect to receive through, that was my phone, somehow, that was my phone falling off, receive a whole environment object of theme data at the same time. So add environment object, var theme is a theme manager, and then down our line width we'll say use the theme dot stroke width. Now in concept view, rather than having two pieces of individual state, we'll instead use @StateObject to create a new theme manager and share it in the environment. So I'll say @StateObject var theme is a theme manager. That means whenever we have things like title font, we've now got to say theme title font, and then theme slider value, and then theme title font. This should actually be stroke width, sorry. Stroke width now. And then down here, it changes two modifiers to be .environmentObject with that theme. Post the whole thing into the theme. Now with that change, all being well, it should look to users more or less the same, right? Maybe it's Georgia by default now, but otherwise the same. We can drag the slider around to see thick or thin circles, and we can choose between various fonts we want to have. But there's an important difference here. See how when I'm dragging a slider around, it's printing out, it's reinvoking the body again and again, just cool. But it's also going to do that when I change the font. So in custom and default. But also if I just keep default, nothing else. It still reinvokes body here. And so it's creating lots of extra work here, right? With no actual benefit at all. It's reinvoking body, even though title font's not being used in Circle View. Now, from a Swift UI perspective, I think this makes absolute sense. This class is saying publish change announcements when these two things change, right? And Swift UI hasn't really got an idea of knowing what's changed, just that something's been changed behind the scenes. And so maybe behind the scenes, stroke width is calculated as a result of title font changing. It doesn't know. It can't tell. So to be safe, it reloads everything. Try to think of it like this. When you use environment object or observed object on external data, you are creating a dependency for this view on that data. You must reinvoke the body when this thing changes somehow. It doesn't matter if the actual body doesn't use the data that changes, because if you remember, SwiftUI doesn't do tree diffing. It'll just reinvoke it all, no matter what. So, when you bring together this powerful safety of having a default value at all times, backed up by skipping unnecessary work, I hope you can see why using environment keys are preferable where possible. Now, of course, as with many things, there's a middle ground here. You can store your data as a shared theme, then expose it as an environment key. And this works when you want to be able to have all data in one object for reading and writing, but you still want to avoid surprise crashes from missing data. To do this, you might start by abstracting your theme information to a protocol, like this, protocol theme. Then we'll have stroke width is a double, get and set. Then a title font is a font, get and set. Then go ahead and make some structs conforming to that protocol based on whatever theme requirements you have. So I might say there is a default theme here. This has a stroke width of 1.0 and a title font of title font key.default value. Next, you'd wrap this thing in a class that's able to publish changes when that theme updates. Now, apps usually only have one theme active at a time, so you could implement this as a singleton if you wanted to. You might say in our theme manager, you have an active theme that's any kind of theme defaulting to default theme. Then you might have a static var shared is a new theme manager and private init, whatever. So we've got one theme here called default theme. Of course, you can add more, light mode theme, dark mode theme, the super ancient style Windows theme, hot dog, if you want to sear your eyeballs. A whole bunch of themes. It's flexible around it. We can now inject this as a key, making another custom environment key. I know it's a bit painful, but we'll do it again one last time. Struct theme key is an environment key with a default value equal to, any theme I need here. It's the protocol. And then theme manager .shared.active theme by default. And then an extension on environment values with theme, any theme. Get will be self, theme key.self, and then set will be that equals new value, like that. Now we're going to expose this thing to our views in a natural way, but we can't just add a view extension this time because we actually have to watch the theme manager for changes. We don't own the theme manager because it's a shared singleton in the environment somewhere ultimately, but we need to at least read it and watch for changes. So we're going to say there's a theme modifier, view modifier, because that can have observed objects, and this can watch theme manager.shared. So now we've told SwiftUI we want to watch that for changes. And then in its body method here, we can take our content and attach the environment key for the theme here, like that. Send the thing we're watching into the environment. So we're watching it externally as an observed object and injecting it as a simple value into the environment. And now we can wrap that up in a view extension for easier use. We'd say extension view, func themed, returns some view with a modifier of theme modifier. Oops. Theme modifier. Modifier. Come on, modifier. There we go. Boom. With that all done, we can now move to content view and move over to using observed object for its theme manager. So we'd say rather than state object, making a new one here, at observed object, var theme is theme manager.shared. And that means using now theme.active theme. Active theme, title font here and here and here and so forth, all the way through, quite dull. But then critically, just put it into the environment isn't enough anymore. We need to do that via our themed helper method, because that then sets the environment key we care about here and here. The interesting part now lies inside circles view, because we can now switch across to using environment again rather than environment object. So we'd say at environment theme is var theme, and then otherwise more or less leave it the same, like that. So this is better, right? We can now press Command R and see our circles changing like this with it printing out nicely. We still get announcements. We're still getting body when we change between fonts, which isn't great. But if I change the same font again and again and again and again, that isn't changing. That isn't being announced anymore. So that's an improvement, right? It's now not doing quite so many change notifications. And of course, we now get the safety of having a default value in place. There'll always be a theme in place somewhere in there, our default theme or light, dark, whatever you want to. Theme will always be in there. So that's better. But we can get even better because at environment here uses a key path, right? We're saying watch for theme. So rather than observing a whole observable object in the environment, we can actually tell SwiftUI, I want to watch just one part of the theme, the bit I care about. And we can actually say here, don't watch the whole theme, watch the theme's stroke width. Like this. And otherwise, I don't care, just watch stroke width. And now, all being well, we'll see dragging a slider cause the things get thicker and smaller and printing the text out here. But changing the fonts does not trigger anything anymore. Even though they are changing, this view body is not being re-invoked. So we're saving lots and lots of work here. We're back to where we were originally in terms of performance, while also having the environment object there elsewhere if needed. So, for codable, for example, to write it on one lump or whatever. This approach obviously takes more work. A lot of environment keys here, injecting and helpers and but it gives the opportunity to synchronize changes everywhere with some kind of theme control panel, for example, but we also get the guaranteed safety of environment keys and performance. It's an improvement over environment objects.